Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome, friends, readers, listeners, and viewers tuning in from wherever you may be. I appreciate your fellowship and for sharing and asking the questions that you do and leading us in insight and discussion and for sharing your own testimony with me. I appreciate the fellowship and for supporting our work in the way that you have. Today I'm honored to have with me as guest Dr. Joseph Lumpkin, who has a wide variety of works that precede him in many different books and shows, and he's got a lot of videos available of his lectures and his the shows that he's previously done on YouTube and other places. He's an author of more than 25 books on various subjects. Theology, religion, the fallen angels, church history, and he's also the CEO of Fifth Estate Publishing, where you can find his work, Fifth Estate Pub, hybridization.com for those that are interested in the number of things that he has written about and done research in. I'm very honored to have you as guest, Joseph, and would you address the listening audience, and we'll continue on.
Yeah, thank you, Zen. I appreciate it, and I appreciate your time and your offer to be on your show.
Yeah, well, it's definitely our honor, and I'm glad to have a chance to ask you about various things, because I know that there's not a lot of people that have done research in the fullness and the scope that you have, and I personally have been one of those that has found the extra biblical books fascinating as far as topic and their ability to fill in detail on a variety of different things, specifically the early life and the childhood of Christ, and even the lineage and the story of Mary preceding, and so there's a lot of things that I feel have been excluded, have been kept hidden, whether that's on purpose or not. It remains to be debated and is largely contested in a number of arenas, but the fact is that a lot of information has been kept away from the masses, and during the time of the early apostles and the early disciples of Christ, there were thousands, even tens of thousands of texts on a wide range of topics, and many gospels and apocalyptic texts that most people of this day and age have no longer heard about. And a lot of the books that you have done have been to bring forth this information so that the public still has access and can look into and research these things for themselves. And I think that's a very important service that you've done for humanity. And so for that, we are certainly appreciative.
Well, I do appreciate it. It really was an act of selfishness on my part. The whole thing started with research I was doing on the book of Jude several years ago. And there is a quote in Jude that says that God will come back with 10,000s of his saints to exact vengeance. And there was a small note, footnote, that said that it was a quote from the book of First Enoch. And I thought, if a book is quoted for an entire paragraph in the scriptures, and Jude himself thought that this book was authentic and real, and he used it as a base for his part of his scripture, I should know more about it. And so I picked up a couple of translations, and I thought, well, these truly are subpar. The translations themselves were written in a stilted King James type of English, which used to be the way that people of the 1800s and early 1900s tried to add weight to their translation, and it just obscures the meaning. So we set about to publish these books in modern English with notes, and it just took off. And I thought, well, there are people there like myself who are craving this knowledge. And it turns out that Enoch was the springboard of all of this, because you would think that the books of Jubilee and Enoch and all of those were extra canon, non-canonical, apocryphal books. But as it turns out in my studies, Christianity in the East and Christianity in the West are not the same. And the Bible, in one of the oldest sects of Christianity, that is the Ethiopic Christians, have both of these books in their Bible. And with the discovery of that, it set me on a road that I'm yet to get off of, which is, what is non-canon? What is canon? Why are they canon? Why were they hidden? Why are they not there? Sometimes we find that they're actually in other Bibles, the Syriac or Samaritan Bible, or the Catholic as opposed to the Protestant Bible. And if they're in that Bible and those Christianities, if you will, those sects, then who are we to say that they're not canon and they're not, if not necessary, then it's certainly fruitful to read.
I agree. And my interest in the book of Enoch was spurred in a similar way. In that particular passage, I had found also in the first book of Enoch, and so led me. And then the other thing was Genesis 6, verse 1 through 5, where it speaks about the sons of God mating with the daughters of man and creating a race of giants. That certainly intrigued me and it led me into a long and very profound investigation where I was hungry for other scriptures, passages, books, anything that would elaborate and grant me detail on that particular topic. And certainly the book of Enoch does that in greater degree than any other text that I've found that's available out there. Can you comment on that?
I agree with you. Yes. The book of Jubilee and the book of Jasher and the book of the Giants also feeds into this base of knowledge, but by far, First Enoch is the book to go to. It appears that Enoch is a bridge between the Christianity and Judaism of the time, written about 200 B.C., and coming into its own and being added to during the first part of the Christian period, and answers, informs, constructs our belief in angelology and demonology. It's all kind of centered around that book.
Absolutely. Another thing that the book of Enoch helped me to ascertain, I think, in a correct understanding, was the nature of evil and the origin of evil and how that got to be a predominant thing that we're dealing with in this embodiment and here on this planet, and helped me to understand that we're in a fallen state of being and that we're living on a planet where the powers, the principalities, Satan in particular, have been granted temporary authority. And before then, I was confused as to why the Father, the creator of us all, would allow evil to, become as prevalent as it is, and also to be in existence in the first place. And then, so the book of Enoch gave me clarity in helping me to understand that it was a part of the Most High's angels that rebelled with him and joined Lucifer in insurrection and were cast out, and they were put in a different place. They lost their first estate, and they were kicked out of the upper heavens, and so all of that helped me to gain perspective and to really renew my perspective on faith and the goodness and the rule of law and the justice of God as the overseer of creation and the universe.
It does answer a lot of questions. It really does. There was a debate for a long time, how many angels could dance on the head of a pin kind of thing. Do angels have free will? And the book of Enoch absolutely states that they do indeed have free will, but they do not have forgiveness. They fell, and there is no bridge, no way back, no mediator, no propitiation for sin, and so there they are stuck in their lower estate, as you put it. The book of Enoch, combined with Jubilees and Jasher, give us a huge picture. Men were put here and given wives to impregnate and to move the race forward. And the book of Enoch tells us that the angels, because they are immortal, were never intended to have wives. they would live forever. So the establishment of the realm of the angels was supposed to be forever and eternal, and to have a particular set of numbers. That is to say, God created everything in 6 days. If you believe that literally or figuratively, doesn't really make any difference as long as you think that there is a termination to the creation pattern, that he stepped back and said, okay, this is what I'm going to create, and now we'll let it go on its own. And that includes, if you believe in evolution or not, it doesn't make any difference as long as there's a terminal period. Then you must say two things. All angels were created at this particular time, and all human souls were created at this particular time. And so we have lived together forever, from eternity until our incarnation as children, as newborns, in what is called the Gulf, G-U-P-H or G-U-F, a storehouse of souls. And in that particular period of time, the angels were also created, but were supposed to be eternal. And so when they fell, they literally fell for the same reason that most men fall. They fell for lust. They fell for that need to experience something new, something grander, to reach beyond themselves, and to experience something that they were not intended to experience. The thing that really gets me, the thing that people don't understand if you really read these texts, is that when the angels came down, there were 200 of them. They had a leader. The book of Enoch says that all sin should be assigned to Azazel. But when it happened and the impregnation occurred and the procreation occurred, the angels never left. They stayed. They taught. They lived among us. They were not considered the evil spirits. Their children were considered the evil spirits because they were the amalgam that should never have happened. They were the problem. They were the mixture, the hybrid. And we are told that when they are killed, evil spirits came out of them because they were part spirit and part flesh. And that these are the part of the demons that we're fighting today. Because when the body is killed, the spirit went out into the wilderness. And the Bibles or the non-canonical text tells us that they sleep not, they hunger not, they thirst not, and they torment men forever.
Yeah, the book of Enoch, chapter 10, is very clear on that and speaks about how they became like demons and devils and wandering ghosts seeking bodies to possess. So do you consider them the children of the fornication of angels and humanity, these hybrid beings that were not supposed to ever come into being, as the wickedness, as the source of evil that we see, as far as when people say that places are haunted or that there's poltergeist activity, because there seems to be a lot of shows on contending that as a reality.
In a word, yes, I do believe that. We have two different, or actually three different areas that we have to take into consideration. Well, first of all, we have to ask ourselves what happened to the angels, the third of the angels that fell when Lucifer fell. That's one category. We have to ask ourselves what happened to the 200 that fell with the Watchers. We have to ask ourselves what happened to the children of these, which are the evil offspring that the book of Enoch talks about. Now, God tried to undo the damage as best he can without destroying the world. He sent the flood. But the book of Jubilees, I believe, tells us that it wasn't only the offspring and their evil that caused him to do that, but the last straw was the fact that the angels were teaching men to manipulate DNA, manipulate animals. They were teaching how to combine species. And this could be an answer to the harpies and minotaurs and centaurs of the past. But it is one of the things that the books point to and say, not only do I have to get rid of these offspring, but I have to get rid of the abomination that you've caused by enacting the knowledge passed along to you by the angels. They were teaching men all kinds of things, and this is one of the things that God looked at and said, I can't have this. These are not my creations. These are yours, and I've got to destroy them because they're evil. So
I agree with you there.
To expand on that just a little bit, let's kind of go off-road just a moment and look at the New Testament. Well, first we'll look at the Old Testament, and then we'll look at how it connects. You've got the offspring. They've been wiped out. The spirits have come forth. They're roaming around trying to get a body to inhabit. In the same place that all of this happened, King Saul was sent in and told by God, told by the prophet, kill everything. Bring absolutely nothing back. Don't let anything survive. It was a way of God sending in the Israelites and protecting them and saying to them, everything is contained in one area. If you kill everything, then these spirits will have nothing to inhabit. Come back. Don't bring anything with you. And we can contain this problem. But what did Saul do? He brought back things for sacrifice, including the king of that area. And that's when he lost the throne. It was such an egregious act that God took from him Israel itself. And then you have this quote that everybody uses kind of out of context that says God would have obedience rather than sacrifice. And that's where that came from. So when you skip forward into the time of Christ, now you have the demoniac. And the very first thing that happens there is when he is confronted and the demons tell him they are legion. There are many, many of them, thousands of them, inhabiting this one person. The first thing they say is, let's go back into the pigs. Well, that's where they came from. You see, they were inhabiting the animals of the time, and so they wanted to go back home. But Jesus made them run into the ocean and drowned. So it kind of answers questions that we don't even know enough to ask the right questions about. It connects everything from the very beginning to the very end as to how these demons are possessing and going about and doing their harm.
I agree with you, and yes, that's a very interesting way to look at, because I didn't consider that as far as Samuel and his judgment against Saul and telling him that the kingdom would be rent from him. In that his bringing them back, they would look for other bodies to possess, and like leaven, pretty much corrupt the whole again. It seems to be a continuation of the wars when the people were taken out of the bondage of Egypt and led by Moses across the Red Sea, and the Egyptians were drowned, and then Joshua was led into the Promised Land and told to slaughter every man, woman, and child. It would be similar to that, and also Moses was given a vision of how they wouldn't do it, and how like leaven again, it would corrupt the whole, and then we would later have the wars of David and Goliath and his brothers, and the ongoing, the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, so to speak. And for people that don't understand Bible history and how it was that Israel and even the Father and the Son in the many judgments that they brought against the fallen angels, people think without this discernment, without this understanding that the father is homicidal, almost genocidal, in that he had demanded the people to slaughter even children, but they don't understand as to the context of what was happening.
Absolutely, yeah. It does put a lot of things in context, and it makes you understand why that was such a horrible act. That he had a chance to set everything right, but he chose to do things his own way. And I like your analysis. It is like leaven. It is. It spreads everywhere.
Right.
So
right.
We have some very interesting information. The book of a small book called the Book of the Giants names a lot of these angels. Now we know part of their names from the first, second, and third book of Enoch. But in the middle of all of this, in the middle of the Book of Giants, we have this name called out, which is the Babylonian king, or I should say Sumerian king. We have Gilgamesh sitting as part of the fallen angel group, as one of the hierarchies there, one of the leaders. Not the absolute leader, but one of the strongest people. So it begs the question, if Gilgamesh's name is called out, and there are other names in there, are these fallen angels and their kindred the god kings that we have in our past, in our mythology? Hercules, Achilles, Gilgamesh, the list goes on. All of these humans with special properties, special abilities and talent, somewhat superhuman. It kind of makes you wonder if it doesn't all come back to these fallen ones.
Yeah, I agree with you too on that premise. And my research has kind of led me to that discernment, and that because even like Berosus and Manthea, when they were asked to write the Egyptian and the Chaldean histories of the planet prior to what was the history of their time, they wrote about, and even the Sumerians in their king list, they have all these hybrid, semi-divine beings in having their long lifespans, and they list them as being, the kings and the patriarchs over the early peoples prior to the appearance of Adam and Eve. And so I definitely think that, that they were the early rulers, and that they had installed many a time their hybrid children to be the rulers. And then, we have the weird anomaly as far as these different cone-headed people that are depicted in like the Egyptian hieroglyphics and like Akhenaten, and these individuals with these elongated skulls, and a lot of that has been explained away as babies having boards strapped to their head. But those that have actual skulls, they look at them, even the suture points and the way that the skull and the bones had grown and come together are completely different than a normal human skull.
Yes, well, you have to ask yourself, even if they were bounding the head or boarding the head, that was they came from someplace. It came from something that they considered to be worth emulating, and so you may find babies with these patterns on their skulls that may have boards, but when you track it back far enough, you have to ask the question, why were they doing that? Well, they were emulating something that they were worshiping. And so it leads back to your exact point, that it came from somewhere And when you get back far enough, you find out that the skulls were indeed shaped like that at one time.
There's a question from the chat room here, Joseph, and they want to know the association between Gilgamesh and Nimrod, and if both were in fact the same, if that's your opinion, or if you have a perspective on that.
Well, it is my opinion that they could very well be the same, yes. Nimrod, it turns out, got his ability as a hunter from, according to one of the books, stealing the cloak that God had made, the animal skin that God had made for Adam and Eve. So it's passed down, stolen, ended up in Nimrod's hands, gave him very special qualities. And that's one of the things that made him such a great hunter. So it could well be that this is the same person, because you have the same kind of divinity, if you will, or semi-divinity instilled in both. And there's a lot of parallels. So, I do not discount that by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, I've read some things along that perspective as well. I can't even recall exactly where, but I do remember also reading that Esau, before he had gone to sell his birthright to his brother, that one of the reasons that he was running away is because he had killed Rod and had taken that exact tunic or cloak or whatever it was that you were referencing. Have you heard anything along that line?
I have not. I will have to go back and look at that. It's an interesting story.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly where it was that I read that. I've read so many different texts, but I do recall having read that same thing, and he thought that, and he was famished from having run from having done that crime, and that he didn't think he was going to make it another day anyways, and so that was one of the reasons why he was so easy to give up his birthright. But anyways, can you tell us some of the other interesting things that you have come across in researching the various extra biblical books, and also if you would quickly, could you answer as to do you think that the canon process was to kind of hide truth and hide some of this knowledge from the masses, because we know that during Christ's time that he named the Pharisees, who were the church authorities of his day, as being responsible for hiding the truth. He even says that in the Gospel of Thomas.
Yes. The quick answer, short answer is absolutely yes. Yes. We have, I think, 2 or 3 converging things going on. First of all, you have a belief system that is in conflict with other belief systems. You had 2 or 3 major Christian sects that are vying for attention, vying for power at the time. You are not going to have in your list of books any book that is going to go contrary to your belief system, which is going to make possible your power system. And that's very important to understand. No orthodoxy, if you will, once it comes into power as an orthodoxy, will allow the heretic, which is anybody that's not in power at the time, from gaining a foothold. So you eliminate those books. You mentioned the book of Thomas, the Gospel of Thomas. It is a perfect example of this. My belief is the Gospel of Thomas is older than all of our Gospels. It was probably the first. It probably came from the same period as the Q document, the real sayings of Jesus. They are much the same. And in that book, you will find that pretty much it dismisses any authority. It says, the kingdom of heaven is in you. You've got to seek it there. If you say it's above you, then the birds have already entered. If you say it's below you, then the fish are already there. But it's inside of you. The kingdom of heaven is inside of you. And you must seek it there. So basically this does away with the need for priests and popes and bishops and all of that. And if you're trying to build a power structure, you certainly don't want anything like that coming in. The other thing that it did was, after the canonization, if you will, after the decision as to what books were going to be included, you then had a corruption of those books, because by about 300 or 400 AD, you had a shift away from women and toward men, because men were in the structure of authority within that Christian church around the time of Constantine. Now, before then, the church was headed up by a lot of women, but we had to get rid of that. So we started changing the translations. For example, in the book of John, it says, greetings to the elect lady and the children. And I've always been taught that that was the church and the parishioners. But if you dig deep enough, you find out that the elect lady is it's just a mistranslation, it's a corruption. It's a woman whose name is Electa. But we don't have, we don't want women in authority, so they changed it. Then we have the Gospel of Paul and Thecla, where Thecla was a very strong-willed woman who traveled with Paul for a while and was apparently a better evangelist than Paul himself. That book was left out because we can't have a woman in authority like that, especially because she calls Paul a coward, because when she got in trouble, Paul ran out on her. So when you're establishing your hierarchy of authority figures, and most of them are men, get ready for some anti-woman corruption within your scriptures.
There were also, for those that are not familiar with the book of Paul and Thecla, there were numerous miracles associated with her protection as well, from being murdered by the authorities of the church, even so much that she was placed into the arena, like a gladiator's arena, and the female lioness protected her from other male lions that were trying to devour. And so there were a lot of miracles associated to her preservation, and it's a fantastic book. For those that have not heard about, and if you're interested in reading it, it's Paul and Thecla, and I believe that's Thecla. But one other comment, last week I had established the whole premise for this show in doing a show on the secrets kept hidden since the foundation of the world, and one of the reasons why I did bring out a lot of parables from the Gospel of Thomas is because of what Joseph had exclaimed earlier, in that it's one of the oldest texts, and also it's a text that is said to have been written after the ascension of Christ, after his death on the cross and his having gone down into Sheol and broken open the doors of brass, the gates of iron, and led the patriarchs, which had up until that time been gathered in Sheol, to the Archangel Michael, and had them baptized in the Archerusian lake, and then also placed into paradise. But there were many, that was the first resurrection, and there were many that were testimony. The Gospel of Nicodemus is one of those texts which gives us great detail on this particular event, but in that show, I read this one particular passage which I'd like to bring out and share with everybody here. It's verse 39 from the Gospel of Thomas, and it says this: Jesus said, "The Pharisees and the scribes have taken the keys of knowledge, gnosis, and hidden them. They themselves have not entered, nor have they allowed to enter those who wish to. You, however, be wise as serpents and as innocent as doves." And in the New Testament, many times he exclaims how the Pharisees have done this same exact thing in hiding the knowledge and the wisdom and the gnosis of knowledge, truth, wisdom, all these things from the masses, so to keep people dumbed down and disconnected from a personal relationship with the Father and the Son. And, they, up until that time, they've had the church as the intercessory, the intermediary between people and God. And that kind of control reaps all kinds of wealth as well as power and the ability to press the masses and to garner donations from kings and different things of that nature. Joseph, would you like to comment on that? Joseph, you still with us? Oh, I must have lost him. I think we got disconnected. We'll wait for him to call in again. But for those that have not heard that show, here we go.
Are you there?
Yes. Apologize. I didn't know that we had gotten disconnected. Were you able to hear my last comment as far as I had read a passage real quick about the Pharisees. Okay, would you like to comment on that?
Yes. I apologize. We live so far out in the country here that occasionally this happens. So apologies to your listening audience there. So the keys to the kingdom. Any truth at all that is worth its weight. It's actually a very simple truth. There are no truths that are complex. There are truths that seem to be, if you mathematically carry them out in physics and so on and so forth. But really, for example, E equals MC squared is pretty straightforward to the point, and it sums up so many things, and it's just so simple. Spiritual truth is much the same way. The keys to the kingdom have to do with an internal connection. A gnosis is, by any stretch of the imagination, only a seed of knowledge passed directly from God to the believer or to the seeker, better say to the seeker. So we kind of gloss over this because even our Bible says that we must come to the knowledge of the saving grace of God. It doesn't say that we have to come to the faith. It says we have to come to the knowledge. So you have to understand before you can you are led to believe. In other words, you must have something to believe in, and that something is the knowledge that you're brought to by the Spirit. Well, if you take that truth and you twist it, then you get the church today. In other words, faith became the church. Faith in the church became the overarching problem, not faith in God being the salvation of man, but faith in the church and in its baptism, in its ordinances, in its the liturgy, the ceremony. And so we were held hostage. Nothing exemplifies this any greater than the Judaism of the time. You see, between 200 BC and 200 AD, we were going through this hyper-religious, hyper-literal problem. That's where part of our writings come from. They're midrash. They're an explanation of what went on. So you have, for example, the book of Genesis talking about the fallen angels and so on and so forth. And then you have a book that is written to actually explain all of that, because everything has to be taken very literally. Well, spirituality is not a literal thing. Law is a literal thing. You can count out the seeds of your beans and rice and cumin and whatever, and you can tithe off of them. But tithing does not save you. Baptism does not save you. None of this saves you. None of the liturgies save you. The church doesn't save you. The gnosis begins the point of salvation. And that's what the keys to the kingdom really are. It's the gnosis passed from God directly to the individual that makes him sit up and go, but wait, something's missing. And then you start down the road of salvation.
Joseph, the listening audience is hearing some static over the line. Would you mind calling in one more time to see if we can get a little bit of clarity on that?
Sure, no problem. Be right back.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll see if that's a little bit better. I think that you're absolutely right as far as the gnosis, because Christ told us to know thyself, and it's in knowing thyself that people realize that the keys to the kingdom are within, and that you don't need to have an intercessory or intermediary. You don't have to rely on the church or other individuals for your relationship, for your personal relating with the Father and the Son. And that would take away from their power and their ability to control. And so I think that's one of the reasons why the Gnostic texts were, and people, individuals, groups like the Cathars were targeted and persecuted, and that a lot of the animosity between the church and populations of people that really knew and had a beautiful relating with the Father and the Son is because they did not need the church for that. And one of the things in this day and age is so many people rely on what other people say and how they interpret the gospel rather than even reading the text. They'll more likely read a book by some famous pastor or preacher or somebody about what they think of the text rather than reading it for themselves.
Absolutely. First of all, is this connection better?
I still hear a little bit of static, but I'm going to give you I'll let you know after this commentary, and we'll see because it only seems like when there's dead air, but I don't hear it now, so hopefully it will be better. But
okay,
I'll let you know.
All right, I can call back in if you wish. So the first thing is when he says, "Be still and know I'm God," I think that's what he really meant. So let's address real quick the Cathars, and then we'll come back to another part of the question. So in the 1200s, there was one huge outpost of Gnosticism left, and the church was so frantically frightened of the whole thing that they sent their armies in, and the general's command was, kill everything, man, woman, and child. God will know his own. So here are Christians that are wiping out not just the Cathar enclave, but the entire region. It would be basically the same as coming in and wiping out a county because you didn't want anything within a city or the outskirts of the city to escape. So whether you were Catholic or whether you were Gnostic, you were dead if you lived in the area, because that's how afraid they were of the Gnostic push just to know God and live peaceably and to seek Him internally and to meditate on the Word and to be still and know He is God. So that amount of fear in itself should tell you that this is a very, very potent and an important theology. It is a simple theology. So Gnosticism, it has as many denominations as we have Christian denominations today. So it's very difficult to say this is what a Gnostic believes and this is what they don't believe, because what they are tied together with each other is just this one common thread of knowing God, having this gnosis that comes in, and we would call it salvation experience, but we don't rely on the church to get us there. Now, having said that, let's kind of cut back. It's like trimming a bush to find the good stalk. If you say that you need the Bible for salvation, you condemn the first 1,500 years of Christianity. Certainly, there's no way that you can't condemn the first 400 years of Christianity. You don't need the Bible. The Bible is a series of books. It's a library put together because it is, A, what the people were reading, and B, what fit the theology of the orthodoxy of the time. Now, it's not to say that the truth isn't in the Bible. It's to say that those books that are chosen have a particular slant. But what I'm getting at is, if we really stop to think about this, we ourselves are Gnostics. We really do come from this group, because if you buy off for one moment on the fact that Christianity did not come from the Bible, it came from Jesus' faith, his religion, his relationship with the Father, and we didn't have the Bible until the canonization, and that took a lot longer than people thought. It didn't end in Constantine's time. Even up to the point of Martin Luther, we were arguing about what should be there. Martin Luther hated the book of Jude. He called it a straw gospel. He said, I'd rather burn Jimmy in the flames. There's an apocryphal conversation with him and another theologian that says it's a pissy little book that should be thrown into the river. So we have all of these theologians that are battling, even up to Martin Luther's time, as to what really belonged in our Bible. So canon is unsettled. And I just want to get that one point across. We don't need the Bible except as a general book of edification, not as a book of salvation, and certainly not as a book of meditation to know God. You do that through gnosis.
Yeah, I agree, because a lot of times people consider that the way to salvation is through a book or through a building, but it's through building a relationship with the Father and the Son, and that takes as much effort as having a marriage with your wife or developing a relationship with your children. And in a lot of people, especially of this day and age, they miss that, and they don't dedicate their time to developing that, and they consider the Father and the Son, just out there somewhere, and don't really speak to them. They may pray, but they're not really seeking that intimacy that I feel the other true seekers of, and especially the patriarchs and those that the men and women of God throughout history, they had that relationship and that dialogue, that ability to ask questions and receive revelations, whether through dreams or however it was, because the Spirit speaks in so many different ways, and that's also another thing that the Gnostic text tells us about, is that that the Father and the Son speak to us in many different ways, and the Holy Spirit it gives revelation to all of us. It's just that so many don't listen or don't understand the language of God, and they think that they're either not worthy or that, because we're just regular people, that the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit are not going to interrelate with us on that level. But the truth is that the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit are every day, daily, trying to speak and relate with us and have relationship on an intimate level with us. But so many people don't have a priority as far as the kingdom and salvation and that kind of relationship to see that they are, in fact, putting forth that effort.
Yes. The problem of that area in our society is growing and growing, partly because of our hyperactivity and our attention deficits. When we pray now, we just talk to God and then go on about our business. If you really want to know what He's saying, shut up. Just shut up. And shut up for a period of time. Quiet your mind. Shut up inside and outside. Don't babble. Don't let your mind chase itself like a pack of monkeys. Just shut up. And if you can quiet the voice and be there for a while, He is here and He is not silent. The reason I said what I did a few minutes ago regarding the area around 15 or 1600 is because up until that time, all Bibles were handwritten. They were very, very, very expensive. No layperson, unless he was rich, had a Bible. We didn't have a mass output until the Gutenberg press made it so. And then after that, we had a lot of Bibles that were misprinted. If you believe that in the inerrancy of the Bible, I've got news for you. It ain't so. We had the adulterer's Bible, which says that thou shalt commit adultery. We had the baker's Bible, which has another misprint in it. We had all of these Bibles that had these different errors until we kind of got it together, and we're evolving. Most people don't realize religion continues to evolve, even today. A great case in point came out of the Catholic Church not long ago when they got rid of limbo. Now, to most people, that just kind of went over their heads, and they went, so what? The Catholics got rid of limbo. Big deal. But it really is a big deal, because if you think it through, it changes everything. We have been taught original sin for so long that we've actually come to believe it. We believe that a child is born in sin because it is born into this world and then all people are sinners. The Greek Orthodox Church, the Eastern Orthodox churches, they don't believe that. They believe that you have to sin to be a sinner. And if you really tie me down and torture me, I'm going to tell you I believe the same thing, and I think that you do too. Most people do. We don't want to condemn children to hell just because they're not baptized in some church to remove the original sin. Now, the Catholic Church could not look their parishioners in the eye and say that kind of stuff, even though St. Augustine did. He actually said, sorry, if a child's not baptized, it's going to hell because it's a sinner. We haven't removed the original sin. So we constructed limbo in the Catholic Church. Now, I'm not Catholic. I'm just a theologian, so I'm just speaking the we is a universal we. We constructed limbo. And that's where babies float in a type of purgatory, but they're not tormented. They're just happy and floating there forever, which seems to me to be horrible in the first place. But now the Catholic Church has come back a couple of years ago, and it said there's no longer limbo. Poof. All the babies go to heaven. Well, they said we have faith that this is probably true, that all the babies went to heaven. Okay. Fine. Now you have to ask yourself, what happened to that child's original sin? Are they saying that the children did not have original sin, that were not born of original sin? And so the theology of the Catholic Church is changing with these small things that people don't notice because they're happening kind of slowly under the covers, and only geeks like myself really pay attention to such things.
I apologize, Dr. Joseph. There's something going on in the chat room, which I'm going to address here in just a minute. But I, as far as religion in its evolution, it's an ongoing process. The whole thing with the canon and what is accepted and what isn't, I think all of that is still being decided as well. Because I know that whenever, in my books I quote from a lot of what are the Nag Hammadi codices or different Gnostic texts, the Gospel of Truth, and these different secret books, like the secret book of John and James, and all of these different books, the origin of the world, all these different scriptures and books that most people haven't heard about. One of the reasons I do that work, and I know that in your publishing many of these extra biblical texts that you were trying to do the same, is to just try to provide that information to the masses so that, one, they know it's out there, two, that they can read it for themselves and come to discernment on, what is religion, which is personal relationship with the Father and the Son, that all of these things have been so controlled, and most people are so afraid to anything labeled Gnostic or the Nag Hammadi codices, and I find so many people condemn them without ever having read them or looking into them, like they're some kind of satanic scripture or something, and they are doing all this judging and basing all their opinions on other people's opinions. The so-called authorities, just like the Pharisees in Christ's day and age, without ever having done any kind of investigation. And I believe it was Einstein that said that to condemn something without investigating it is like the height of ignorance. Would you not agree?
I definitely agree. I guess the way that I can address this is I don't need to change anyone else's theology. If you are happy with where you are with God, then God bless you, stay where you are. I do think that the church is broken. I think we have to address the fact that the church itself is broken. If we really believe what we're saying, then we should act like it, and I don't see very many Christians acting like it. So the conversion process, as we understand it, may be a bit amiss. Remember Gandhi himself said, if I could find a single Christian who performed what they believe, then I would become a Christian, but I never could find one. So there's something to be said about this. And the other thing is we have these different theologies, like the name and claim it theology, the kingdom now theology, and all of these that proclaim that you can, think, have faith, and grow rich. But the only people you see growing rich on those theologies are the pastors, because they're sucking the money out of the masses. So in the U.S., Christianity is broken. There's a saying that when Christianity was in Jerusalem, it was a spiritual movement. When it came to Greece, it became a philosophy. When it came to Rome, it became an enterprise. And when it became Americanized, it became a business. And I think we need to get back and realize that Christianity is a Middle Eastern religion, and like other Middle Eastern religions, it demands that we have a direct communication with the Creator.
That's one of the things people have forgotten. That's one of the secrets that has been so stripped away and kept hidden that most of the people they don't seek the secrets, and especially don't even do any kind of real investigation into anything outside of the canon. Most people don't even know about like the life of Christ. We have one story of when he was a 12-year-old child and having left his parents and went back to the temple, and so many people consider themselves to be so-called Christians, and in that they have given their lives over to following Christ as the way and the truth and the light, and yet they have no idea as to his childhood stories, the infancy gospels, or that there are other stories out there which talk about and give great detail on who he was, and as being God incarnate in the flesh, and even that he had supernatural capacity as a young, even as a baby, and how Mary had healed other children and healed others with like his bathwater, his swaddling clothes. There was a time when he was accused of pushing a child off of the roof of one house, and he was accused of murdering that one of his childhood play friends, and he resurrected the child and had him tell the truth of how he had fallen and how Christ wasn't the one that had murdered him. And so all of these stories, and like when I read the infancy gospels and the different stories about the early life of Christ, they moved me in such degree that I found myself crying in many instances, and they deeply touched my heart. And for those that are followers of Christ in such capacity, I think it's very relevant that people know about these kind of stories and to be able to read them for themselves. And that's why I do some of the work that I do, and I know that that's one of the reasons why you do the things that you do as well, Joseph. Can you name some of the books, because you put out many extra biblical books? Can you talk about some of them and detail some of them so that people can know about kind of what is available out there? And if you would also comment on how many texts were available to the early disciples of Christ and early Christianity.
Excuse me. Pardon me. Well, first let me tell you that we have put out a Bible called the Universal Bible, and it gathers all of the books of Christianity together in one Bible. These are the books that are in the Ethiopic Bible, the Syriac Bible, the Samaritan Bible, the Protestant and the Catholic and the Orthodox Christian Bibles. And when you put all of them together, you come to 93 books. So there's 93 books that someone who is a Christian in the world believes is canon. 93, not 66. So don't be Western centric. Broaden your horizons. Think if there's a Christian on the other part of the world that is older than us. Ethiopia, everything flows down the Nile, they said. All things flow down the Nile. And Ethiopia is right down the Nile from Egypt and the Middle East where Christianity actually started. So you have this kind of a keepsake of the Christian faith there. And that particular church has 81 books in their Bible. You have to ask yourself, is God saying less and less to us, or are we just trimming out what we don't like? So that's the first thing. Then we published the Encyclopedia of Lost and Rejected Scriptures. And I don't even know how many books are in here. I have to count, but there's the first and second book of Adam and Eve, and the books of Enoch. There's 3 of those. Jasher, Jubilee, the Apocalypse of Abraham, of Thomas, Second Baruch, the War Scrolls, Sons of Dark versus the Sons of Light, Gospels of Philip, Mary Magdalene, the Apocrypha of John. It goes on and on and on and on, because there were hundreds and hundreds of books that were available. Now, some of these were lost because they fell into disuse, and over a period of time, they simply were lost. They vanished. They eroded. They went away. They turned to dust. Some of them were considered to be of little value, and so they were assigned kind of a secondary or tertiary level in the faith. Generally speaking, those books that came after about 200 A.D. were put in another category. Part of those were the infancy gospel. Some of those were written around 400 or so, and they're considered to be kind of on an area of Christianity that answer a lot of questions. They were people sitting around going, I'm a believer. I am a Christian. I really believe that Jesus was God. But what's it like to be Mary and Joseph? If a 2-year-old has a temper tantrum and he's God, what does that do? And so they were speculating these things, and the Spirit was moving them to write all of these stories to kind of exemplify the problems and the trials and tribulations that they may be going through. So you have Midrash writing, which explains things, and you have these kind of secondary writings that are stories that answer kind of an internal question of what was it like. Now, we still are digging up books. As a matter of fact, about 2 years ago, I guess it was, the Gospel of Jesus' wife was uncovered. It was given to a theologian by the name of Karen King, and Karen translated it. It was about 8 lines, and I'll just read them. It's very, very short, so I'll just read them to you. There are gaps in them, so here it goes. Not to me, my mother gave me life. And then the disciple said to Jesus, something deny Mary is worth it, or Mary is not worth it. We don't know because there's a word missing. And Jesus said to them, my wife, something, and she will be able to be my disciple, something. Let the wicked people be swelled up. As for me, I dwell with her in order to something, and an image, something. So we have 8 partial lines. But the thing about this Gospel of Jesus' wife is it is the first time that we have a document that actually has Jesus addressing Mary Magdalene as his wife. So we are still uncovering things. Even, 2 years ago this popped out and people went, whoa, this is totally different. It is considered to be a Gnostic text. Beyond that, we have really no idea.
Can you give us the background as far as where it was found? Do you think it was authentic? And also I wanted to get you to comment on, have you heard about the 70 books that were recently uncovered? I believe a Jordanian salesman or somebody that was into antiquities, he had them and he was trying to sell them. It was like 70 metal books that were recently discovered that it says that there's even an image of Christ, and that these books may be from that particular time of when he was alive or shortly thereafter.
I don't know much about them except that I have read that they are in existence. I don't know that anybody's come to any evaluation of them, so I don't know that much about them yet. I don't know enough to even speak about it except to say, yes, it was found, but I think we're still trying to figure out what they are. Regarding the Gospel of Jesus' wife, it's just it's the size of a business card, and it was dug up, and here's where things get really kind of odd. The gentleman who supposedly found this has remained anonymous. It was found in the Middle East, we think someplace around Egypt. It was given to Karen King. Dr. King had basically to swear her silence. And so until this thing is kind of passed around and people know more about it, I doubt if we're going to find out exactly who actually gave it to her. But the whole thing is kind of, it's shady. It's kind of, it's really, it makes people like myself very suspicious. Now, Dr. King got a lot of attention. Yeah. It's like if I give you this little postcard and say, hey, this thing came from 400 BC or so, what do you think about it? But don't tell anybody I gave it to you. I'm going to go, really? So we've got several people who say, no, it's really not real. And we've got a lot of people who say, yes, it's real, but it's Gnostic, and therefore it really doesn't speak to what was actually happening at the time. And that brings us back to the D-decay. I know our time is starting to run short, so if you don't mind, I'd like to address this one thing and take whatever questions may be out there, because this may stir up some things.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
The D-decay is a book written, we think, in the first 30 years or so of Christianity. It is a catechism supposedly written by the apostles that tells us what Christians were thinking and what they believed at the time. Please keep in mind that this was in the time frame that James the brother was the heir apparent to Christianity. He had the mother church in Jerusalem and was considered to be the head of the Christian sect at the time. This was before Paul kind of hijacked Christianity. In the book, the D-decay, Jesus is never mentioned as the Son of God. There obviously is no Trinity, because the Trinity came about in Constantine's time in the 300s. He is not considered to be divine. He is a Messiah, that is someone appointed, anointed, and sent for a reason. The reason he was sent was to teach us how to basically get back to God. We had strayed. This raises the question, or maybe answers the question that should have been asked, when Jesus said, more than this will you do. So if Jesus is really God, how can you actually say that I can do more than him? But if he has come to teach us as the Messiah the way back to God, and to listen to our internal voice, and to commune with God, and to feel his guidance, then you can answer the question affirmatively. Yes, we can do as much, or not, if not more, than Jesus himself, because we will live longer. We will have more opportunity, and we can be as much as he is, because they did not believe him to be divine. There was no propitiation of sin. We did not think that he died for our sins. So in the first 50 years or so, Christianity appeared much more like Buddhism than it does today, because it appears that after that, Paul came in and literally took Christianity in another direction. And Christianity at that time of Paul switched from a religion of Jesus to the religion about Jesus, and it took on a different life and a different path. It could be that the reason that Christianity does not work today is because it is being misapplied, that we should look at this as a way to live and a way to commune and pray and worship God, and not a bunch of rules.
I wish we would have been able to bring all of this up in the middle of the show, because I know that a lot of people are going to, have questions, and I certainly, have questions myself. First, I think as far as the text on the Jesus' wife or whatever that text was called, that sounds sort of like something along the lines of the Da Vinci Code, which and this is only my opinion. I think that the Da Vinci Code is flawed because I don't think that Christ came here to do and to fulfill anything that was of the physical. That his mission was of the spiritual, and that he was that he lived a sinless life. And as far as whether he was married, I don't know that at all. But I'm certain that he wouldn't have any children. And again, it's my opinion that in all the things that I've studied and that I've read, I've come to know Christ as that he and the Father and the Son are one, because he has fulfilled, and there was so many prophecies leading up to his incarnation, and even the things that occurred in the sky with the signs in the heaven, both during his birth and even his death and resurrection. All that was supernatural in nature, and for me, confirmation that he and the Father were truly one. And then again, the infancy Gospels and seem to allude and to verify his special character and his special nature as being God come into the flesh. Can you comment on that and where you stand on those particular issues?
Yes, the Da Vinci Code was taken from the books of Mary Magdalene and the Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene and Philip. They were taken out of context, but in one of those books, the Gospel of Philip, I think it is, he says that Jesus kissed Mary often on the, and then that piece is missing. If you actually look at the text, it is missing. So we don't know if he kissed her on the hands, on the lips, or on other bodily parts. We have no idea. So it is speculation, and speculation actually taken out of context. Was he married? I don't know, and it doesn't do anything to my theology, because he was a rabbi. There were the Sadducees, the Pharisees, and the Essenes. If he was part of the Essene group, he didn't have to be married, but if he was a Sadducees or a Pharisee, he probably was married. If he were a rabbi and over 30 years old, he was considered to be totally out of place if he wasn't married, unless he came from a sect that did not have that as part of its belief system. So he could have been celibate. We know that probably John the Baptist was. He was part of the Essene sect, we think. There's a lot of speculation. History is something that is totally speculative. You haven't witnessed it, so you don't really know it. I personally am not a Trinitarian. I can go into why, but basically I believe that Jesus and God were a different hypostasis. Jesus was here. He was praying to the Father. They were in accord. They were in agreement, but I don't think they were one and the same deity. That may be semantics, but it's where I fall on it. I do not believe that the Holy Spirit is a person. I think that the Holy Spirit is the will and Spirit of God and isn't a separate person, but again, is in completely one accord, because how can your spirit be out of accord with you? So that's where I stand on that.
Well, I appreciate you, Joseph, for coming on to the show, and I certainly wish we had more time to expound further on these things. But with the last 7 minutes, I'd like to give you a chance to tell people where they can find your work, and also about the new projects that you have coming out. If you have a site on YouTube or a different name that people can study your videos, and if you don't mind giving out your contact information as to where people can write to you or to send you commentary or anything of that sort.
Well, sure, absolutely. I'd love to hear from whoever wishes to write. There are links on the website. It is fifthestatepub.com, and I guess just a little bit about that. The four estates are taken from a French belief that to keep society in balance, you must have four legs. They are the masses, the people, the clergy, the king or the ruling class, and the free press, the media. The free press in this country is being assassinated, is being crushed. The king no longer listens to the masses, and the clergy are out of control. But what we do have going for us is the fifth estate, and that is the emerging ability of each individual to express him or herself through the mass media, the internet, for example, YouTube, for example. So that's where we got the name. So hopefully, if people are out there and they wish to publish, and they have something worthwhile to say that's not just the run of the mill, we actually entertain that. We pick people that we wish to publish. We are not a vanity or a co-op publishing company. We work just like the big guys. We have become a force in this area. So if we take your work, it is certainly free to you and you receive royalties. My contact information is actually on the website. I'm sorry, Zen, go ahead.
No, I was saying that's really another great service that you are providing to the community. Please continue.
My contact information is on the website. You can actually leave a comment about any particular book, and it'll come directly to me, or you can use the contact information on the website to actually reach out to me at any point. I'm on Facebook. You can reach me there. Fifth Estate and the Lost Books of the Bible both have pages on Facebook that I will answer. And
well,
so
again, I
that's
appreciate you. Oh, also, Joseph, you had mentioned in your bio as far as you did some outreach work, that you were a chaplain and that you did. Can you speak a little bit about that in the final minutes here?
Sure. Years and years ago, there was a gentleman by the name of Mr. Crane, Mike Crane. And Mike Crane started a movement in the Chattanooga, Tennessee area called Karate for Christ. And that was passed down to Ron Shively, who in turn passed it down to me. It is now in the hands of David Dunn. I'm a martial artist. This is my 42nd year in martial arts, and the ministry became a worldwide 10,000-member ministry called Karate for Christ. And I was the president and chaplain for that for many years. It's very difficult to live the life that you want, the Christian life, without discipline. And we found that this really helped the children, gave them something to do, got them off the streets. We became the gym of choice for a lot of homeschoolers at the time. So that was that.
Well, that's wonderful. I used to be involved in martial arts myself many years before I acquired my disability, and I best ways to channel my energy and to learn to, discipline, persistence, how to channel my focus, and so I think that's a wonderful thing that you're doing as well. Joseph, once again, I want to thank you for coming on to the show and for sharing your testimony, and I wish you I wish the Father and the Son watch over and keep you safe, as well as the listening audience, and lead you in all of the different. It certainly seems that you are continually busy in the ongoing project. So thank you, sir.
Oh, thank you, and I appreciate everything, and thank your listening audience, and I hope to hear from them soon. Y'all take care.
Oh, I'm sure you will. God bless all. Good night. Good night, friends. May the Father and the Son watch over all of you and keep you all safe. Till next Saturday. Be blessed. On Angels, church history, and he's also the CEO of Fifth Estate Publishing, where you can find his work, fifthestatepub.com, for those that are interested in the number of things that he has written about and done research in. I'm very honored to have you as guest, Joseph, and would you address the listening audience, and we'll continue on.
Yeah. Thank you, Zen. I appreciate it, and I appreciate your time and your offer to be on your show.
Yeah, well, it's definitely our honor, and I'm glad to have a chance to ask you about various things, because I know that there's not a lot of people that have done research in the fullness and the scope that you have, and I personally have been one of those that has found the extra biblical books fascinating as far as topic and their ability to fill in detail on a variety of different things, specifically the early life and the childhood of Christ, and even the lineage and the story of Mary preceding, and so there's a lot of things that I feel have been excluded, have been kept hidden, whether that's on purpose or not. It remains to be debated and is largely contested in a number of arenas, but the fact is that a lot of information has been kept away from the masses, and during the time of the early apostles and the early disciples of Christ, there were thousands, even tens of thousands of texts on a wide range of topics, and many gospels and apocalyptic texts that most people of this day and age have no longer heard about. And a lot of the books that you have done have been to bring forth this information so that the public still has access and can look into and research these. Welcome, friends, readers, listeners, and viewers tuning in from wherever you may be. I appreciate your fellowship and for sharing and asking the questions that you do and leading us in insight and discussion, and for sharing your own testimony with me. I appreciate the fellowship and for supporting our work in the way that you have. Today I'm honored to have with me as guest Dr. Joseph Lumpkin, who has a wide variety of works that precede him in many different books and shows, and he's got a lot of videos available of his lectures and his the shows that he's previously done on YouTube and other places. He's an author of more than 25 books on various subjects. Theology, religion, the fall, things for themselves. And I think that's a very important service that you've done for humanity. And so for that, we are certainly appreciative.
Well, I do appreciate it. It really was an act of selfishness on my part. The whole thing started with research I was doing on the book of Jude several years ago. And there's a quote in Jude that says that God will come back with 10,000s of his saints to exact vengeance. And there was a small note, footnote, that said that it was a quote from the book of First Enoch. And I thought, if a book is quoted for an entire paragraph in the scriptures, and Jude himself thought that this book was authentic and real, and he used it as a base for his part of his scripture, I should know more about it. And so I picked up a couple of translations, and I thought, well, these truly are subpar. The translations themselves were written in a stilted King James type of English, which used to be the way that people of the 1800s and early 1900s tried to add weight to their translation, and it just obscures the meaning. So we set about to publish these books in modern English with notes, and it just took off. And I thought, well, there are people there like myself who are craving this knowledge. And it turns out that Enoch was the springboard of all of this, because you would think that the books of Jubilee and Enoch and all of those were extra canon, non-canonical, apocryphal books. But as it turns out in my studies, Christianity in the East and Christianity in the West are not the same. And the Bible, in one of the oldest sects of Christianity, that is the Ethiopic Christians, have both of these books in their Bible. And with the discovery of that, it set me on a road that I'm yet to get off of, which is, what is non-canon? What is canon? Why are they canon? Why were they hidden? Why are they not there? Sometimes we find that they're actually in other Bibles, the Syriac or Samaritan Bible, or the Catholic as opposed to the Protestant Bible. And if they're in that Bible and those Christianities, if you will, those sects, then who are we to say that they're not canon and they're not, if not necessary, then it's certainly fruitful to read.
I agree. And my interest in the book of Enoch was spurred in a similar way. In that particular passage I had found also in the first book of Enoch. And so it led me, and then the other thing was Genesis 6, verse 1 through 5, where it speaks about the sons of God mating with the daughters of man and creating a race of giants. That certainly intrigued me, and it led me into a long and very profound investigation where I was hungry for other scriptures, passages, books, anything that would elaborate and grant me detail on that particular topic. And certainly the book of Enoch does that in greater degree than any other text that I've found that's available out there. Can you comment on that?
I agree with you. Yes. The book of Jubilee and the book of Jasher and the book of the giants also feeds into this base of knowledge, but by far, First Enoch is the book to go to. It appears that Enoch is a bridge between the Christianity and Judaism of the time, written about 200 B.C., and coming into its own and being added to during the first part of the Christian period, and answers, informs, constructs our belief in angelology and demonology.
Blog Talk Radio.